What's up, friends? Welcome back to another episode of NFT 365. And throughout this journey from launching on November 11th, 2021, to where we're at now, entering the summer, if we can believe it, summer of 2023, one of the things that I've loved about the NFT space as a whole is not only getting to know people, but recognizing that there are different kind of subsections within this beautiful NFT space. And it doesn't matter when you got into the space. There are different kind of size, different entry points. And we talk a lot about here on the show about people kind of having their aha moment or finding their community that makes them feel like, these are my people. And that's such a important a component to this space. And I'm excited for today's guest because a lot of our guests, a lot of people that are in this community, a lot of them had their very first aha moment, their kind of welcome to community in the Deadfellaz community. And I will say, from afar, I've been a fan from not only the unity and kind of what people have kind of built around it, but it was also one of my favorite events that I went to way back in the very first NFT NYC that we had, and I was it's a great time. And a couple of my really closest friends, I welcomed them into the NFT space. They tried a couple of the communities that I was in, but weren't as kind of all in it until they actually entered the Deadfellaz economy and everything that's been going on there. But on top of that, I really big believer in amplifying strong, powerful voices that have been in this space since day one. And Betty, you are more than that. Then in many ways, you have a stellar reputation in the circles that I care about, and that means the people that are truly believers in good people doing good things. So excited to have you on the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thanks. That's so kind. It warms my heart to hear things like that. It's good to be here.
It's we just got back from New York and we were joking kind of pre-show, right? It's like this is conference season, if we can. I guess it's shitcoin season apparently, and yeah. It's one of those things where it's like it continues going, right? And also, it's kind of it's like award season. It's also, we're recording this on 420, which seems to be a national holiday here in the NFT space as well. But you've been in the space for a long while. I know a lot of our audience will be familiar with you, but some of them will not. Talk to me a little bit about who is Betty pre Web3, and then kind of that entry point or that aha that kind of got you into this space. I think that'd be important for our audience.
Yeah, so for years prior to Deadfellaz or to Web3 or even being aware of NFTs, I was the co-director on a creative production agency that I ran with my husband Syke, who is my co-founder at Deadfellaz now, which is cool. We had a great list of clients. We had a great carry on. It was kind of a good situation. It's actually not dissimilar to how we work now. We would work online. We had teams all over the world in different places. We never had an office. The difference was it was very behind the scenes. So we had no presence at all. We were vendors. We used to get sent from client to client. We were very blessed with the level of client that we had. So we got to work for really large companies and do really exciting things. But when COVID hit, the creative industry took a very big hit, and we lost so many exciting contracts for things that we were developing and really excited about. And those got replaced with COVID explainer videos and workplace health and safety animations. It was not fun being in lockdown creating those things. And we had become increasingly frustrated with just the creative landscape in general at that level. And then also, aside from the stuff that I was doing there with the agency, I was doing a lot of community organizing. So I would organize mutual aid. I would get events together. I would facilitate workshops, mentor women and gender diverse people and First Nations women as well. And it was really fulfilling, but really quite frustrating as well. And I was very disenfranchised by the systems that I was working in. I felt that the impact that I was having wasn't as much as I could push. I just felt very held back by a lot of red tape and, all of that. And then I became aware of NFTs in January 2021. Psych was speaking to some of the artists that are in a digital art collective that he's been a part of for many years called Depthcore. And some of the artists in there had been minting NFTs and they were telling him about it. He told me about it. And for me, it was just like someone threw the blinds open. It was this like, holy shit, this is the new thing. This is the innovation you've been waiting for and the disruption. And like, you can build something here. It's all new and we don't know where it's going, but it's challenging the systems that be and the powers that be. And so I was very excited immediately. I couldn't think about anything else. I was completely obsessed. I was in Clubhouse listening every day, stalking on Twitter every day. It took me a while to actually participate as myself and like jump in. And that's because I felt kind of intimidated by the demographic. I didn't see really any women, or very, very few at the time. And nobody really talking about the things that I cared about deeply. And so I just felt like, is there even really a place for me there? But I continued to look, and I was on Twitter Spaces trying to find people, and I found my community. It only took finding like 5 people that I saw were saying similar things to me, and I thought, no, like there is a space for me here. I can do this, and so jumped right in. And it went from there. Really, I haven't actually logged off crypto Twitter since then.
I know how that goes, right? And I remember those Clubhouse days, right? And I was on the stages a lot during that, like Bored Ape, and even but prior to that, right? It was interesting because I think Clubhouse had such a great representation in many rooms and many conversations, but not really in the NFT crypto space. And I think we can, I think that's probably an obvious thing. I'm gonna continue on that like journey at Deadfellaz, but I want to jump like forward right now, I'm curious of your thought. If you were kind of, you were talking about like kind of like that, seeing the light, hey, get obsessed. If someone was, or if you were getting obsessed today and where the market has been and kind of like, do you still feel like you could find your 5 or 6 people that would, like, what would you suggest for people to find those 5 or 6? When you said that, to me, it's like such an important component, because the ups and downs of this space, if you don't have like that core people that you can lean on that also are kind of going through the same thing, this space can get lonely. And it's no wonder so many people have just pulled the ripcord, because it's overwhelming. Do you think people can still find that today, like where we're at right now? And what would you recommend for them to kind of look at that?
I do. And I think even more so than back then when I started, because it really just took those few people being in the space, doing their thing, talking about what they're passionate about, to give me validation, to feel like I could participate too. And so that is kind of a big driver of why I stick around on social media. I'm sure you see some of the days I get some crazy shit thrown my way, and that's just the nature. It's the nature of the internet. It's the nature of being a woman on the internet as well. But I'm in the habit of opening doors and keeping them open, because that's what people have done for me. Lots of people around me have opened many doors for me, and I want to do the same thing. People wanting to jump in right now, get on Twitter. Literally just look through Twitter Spaces. Like, just have a look through them. You'll find people in there that you resonate with. You'll be able to follow the people that are speaking, message them. Like, honestly, people do respond to messages. It's kind of hard. I try my very best. I'm pretty bad at it because there's so many, but I try my best. And I know that people are very willing to share information in this space. Discords, if you're like, oh, I don't really know what communities I belong to. In these Twitter Spaces, you'll start to hear people saying things that you resonate with. Look at where they're hanging out and then go and hang out with them. And then you'll find more communities, and it goes like that. I feel like that's the way I choose to participate. Some people like to do it based off of like what they want to flip and all that sort of stuff. I'm not really in it for that. So I don't do that. I feel like we're way deeper than just in it for a flip. I think that's probably where it gets lonely,
Yeah, and you know what? I agree with you completely. And we didn't tee this up beforehand, but like, that space, especially that, like, let's just say summer 21 through that fall, through most of 2022, it was so hard to find just like genuine people, even though there was more people in here. I think people make this like weird assumption that because it was like, people were flipping and things were thriving, there was projects coming everywhere, that it was somehow easier. I would actually argue it was way harder, right? And it was harder to, even, and I remember, we can tie this into, the Deadfellaz Mint, like that September, right? That September, I don't think I slept at all. I think that for September 21, because there was so many projects minting. And I remember the week with Deadfellaz, I think my list of the things that we were writing down, and I was buying, I was really buying at community, really wasn't buying for Philip at all at that point. Like I hadn't found my degen side. That wasn't even in my purview, but I believe there was like 11 or 12 projects that I had done enough research at the time that were all minting like that September time frame. And now I feel like it's a little bit nicer to be able to, projects give you a little bit more lead time, but projects have to expose a lot more things than, back then. And I'm curious from your take. You mentioned, earlier, it took a little while for you to like step in as your full self, but launching a project in September of 21, I mean, you pulled the trigger on that much faster than many of us were in this space that kind of saw like, hey, maybe we should launch a project, and waited. How did that kind of come to life to go like, hey, I'm in, I don't see what I want, I'm going to create it. And then you created it. How did that all kind of come to life?
So I've been a person my whole life, and many people listening will resonate with this. I have just a million URLs. I'll have just ideas and I'm like, oh my God, that's the idea. And I'll buy
Yes.
the URL and I'll be like, no, you guys, you don't understand. And I'm like all in for a day. And then I'm like, you know what? That's not actually it. And I collect them. I collect them. And it's been a thing forever.
Yep.
I've always been very entrepreneurial. I've never really wanted to work for anyone else. And I haven't spent much time working for anyone else my whole life. I've done many different jobs, but not often for other people. And so I've always been in the habit of creating. I'm always trying to create. I'm always trying to build things and organize and all of this stuff. It was really, people were approaching Psych constantly, all the time, to be the artist on their project from very early on. And he did a lot of branding stuff for a lot of the early punk events that they had in crypto voxels, which was really cool. Through that, we met a lot of cool people. So one of the OG punks, the last punk, 9999, actually wrote our smart contracts for the Deadfellaz project. And
cool.
we met through that stuff that was given early on as an opportunity. So I have to like tip my hat, because a lot of the crypto punks in the space are really opened a lot of doors for us. But yeah, people were asking him to do the art. I was like looking at how these communities were forming and really fascinated by it all. But I mean, I knew looking at it, I had every skill that was needed to launch a project and run a project well. We've been doing this essentially for many years, just in a different context, right? Like it was an amalgamation of everything that we do together. So I was like, we just need to do this. I was frustrated because I loved the PFP thing, but I just didn't see anything that I wanted to use. I didn't see anything that represented gender as a spectrum or really like meant what I cared about. So I just thought, well, I'll just create it. So we did. It was Friday the 13th of August, 2021. To your point, when you're talking about how many projects were launching at the time, it was so crazy. And the gas wars were insane.
Oh.
And that was a real issue for me, because I was like, I don't want there to be this massive gas war. I don't want whales to come in and like buy them all up. And then people that I really care about, that this project is for, to represent them, are going to get like locked out. They're not going to be able to get access to this. So I think, I'm going to claim it, I think we were the first people to do an allow list ever, but it was very crude. It was like the first 1,300 people in the Discord, they all got access to buy between 1 and 5 Deadfellaz. And how they did that was it was 0.025 the mint price, and all they had to do was fill out like a Google form, send us the ETH directly for what they wanted to buy, whether it was between 1 or 5. And then we minted that amount, that it ended up being like a lot. We minted that ourselves, and then we distributed that to everyone that had pre-bought following the mint. paying for all the gas, everything. I still don't think any project has done an allow list where they've paid the gas for people. But it cost a fucking lot of money, let me tell you.
Yeah. Especially
um,
back then.
yeah,
People that weren't around back then, I try to relate gas prices and yeah, holy hell.
yeah, it was a lot, but it was really worth it because we got a lot of people in that would have otherwise been priced out. And I remember the day of the mint, people were freaking out because Art Blocks was having a drop that day as
Right.
well. And they were like, gas is going to be like, none of us can afford this. Like, gas is going to go too crazy. But then there was a bug in the contract for Art Blocks, so they canceled theirs and we were fine.
So so there's a couple things there I think that are so important. Like let's just take a moment to appreciate the trust, right? Like fill out this Google form,
Yeah.
send us the ETH, and like I mean, and this is like people talk about like the lack of trust in this space. This space was built on just like pure trust, right? I mean, that is such a cool like moment, and I think even early on, right, like we just were believing in like the people and the good of people, and I think ultimately that's why many of us are still here because we felt that and we existed in that time. I think unfortunately there were outside forces that saw that trust and realized it was something they could take advantage of, and we saw that through because even at that point, August, September of 21, like the idea of like a rug pull or someone not like wanting to show up was just so like foreign. It wasn't like we were like kind of looking for that. But I think that's just like it's such a beautiful thing that people are like, oh, I'll fill out this form, I'll send this stranger that I met online that's creating this art with her husband to create like I mean, like it's kind of cool to think about that from like a where else in digital world would we we lived at, especially like COVID times, people
Yeah.
were afraid to buy an online course. People were afraid to like, and yet they were doing that. The other part, talk to me a little bit about the gender side of a representation, right? Because this is something we hit home a bunch here on the podcast. It's something that's extremely important for me for representation, but also removing gender from some of the representation also unlocks some things. That wasn't even something that I thought of or thought was missing in the space. And so I think one of the first times I had heard you speak on a Twitter space and you were kind of calling that out. And I was like, holy hell, like that is such an important aspect. How did that kind of come to life was that always kind of like the art was always going to be kind of gender neutral in that sense? How did that kind of come to life?
It's really important for me because the LGBTQ community is just, I mean, underrepresented in so many spaces, but especially visibly in media and entertainment. And when we're talking about digital identity products, because that's essentially what these brands are now, and you're missing out an entire cohort of people, that's a problem to me. When people talk about, oh, there's more gay people now than there were, or there's more trans people now than there used to be. That's really not the case. People are just feeling validated to be themselves. And we've got this language that allows us to express that and who we are in a more well-rounded way. And I think that is more the case. So as we move into this new phase of people feeling more freedom to express themselves in their authenticity, we need that to be reflected in how we're doing that in the digital sphere. And yeah, with other PFP projects at the time, I was just looking around and like it was all dudes, and then like the only like femme characteristics would be like a pink wig or like boobs. That's it, and that's like supposed to be the woman's PFP or whatever. And then it disregarded anything on a spectrum outside of that as well. And I was like, it's just not the future. It isn't future proof. It's not like, that's not how things are going to be, and it's not how things are for me and my community now. So removing gender from each individual trait meant that designing I think it was like over 450 traits altogether, every single one was void of gender, so that when they're combined through code, they just spit out all of these ambiguous characters where the power is really in the holder to decide what that character means for them, which is really like true sovereignty over the character, in my opinion. You don't really get that. We do in some collections now, but you don't before. Notably, another collection that did it after us that I was really into and pleased to see was Doodles. They did a similar thing, and I really enjoyed that as well. But yeah, it's so important. And I mean, personally, but also for the community, it provides people a home. There's really not many, if any, projects that are vocal about the support of underrepresented communities and the disparity in the space. And so I think that it's important to maintain that. I don't really care if people think that's too political, because it's just human rights, guys.
Yeah, well, yeah, those that think it's too political aren't listening to this podcast. I can pretty much promise you that, because I am loud and proud. I was actually the Grand Marshal in the Pride Parade in San Francisco in 2003 as a cis white straight male, but I had come out vocally. My best friend came out to me in high school, and it made this big story in Virginia Beach, and then they ended up being something that. So for me, I've been very blessed to be exposed and an ally from 2003, long before even social media or digitally. And so, like, I love that component of representation. I also, the talk I gave at NFT NYC was on digital identity, and even just this identity that we're able to now create and remove a lot of those barriers. Right, there's a lot of people, even people that I, up until I joined a Twitter space with them and we have this great bond, I didn't know their gender, right? And the beauty of that is their gender wasn't required for us to build this, amazing bond and this amazing conversations. And I think, even actually one of the people that's co-host with me a couple of times, I refer, like, they use a voice changer, and they've used a female voice changer most of the time. But interestingly enough, like, gender doesn't really come into play there. And so I love that, that was such a, a focal point in the art. Also, I think it's such a big piece on, representation. I'm a advisor on the Galactic Gaylords NFT that just dropped last month, and really focused on, on that space as well. I, as you mentioned, kind of like the, the other part of this side of this is that I think it's not even really the political side. I think anyone that's willing to do something different and that is bold enough to hold true to it, oftentimes that does give a lot of the FUD army or the haters like this continual punching bag, right? Where they feel like they can go back. And I think even more unfortunately, a lot of these men that or identify as men that are cowards, in my personal opinion, that feel like they can use their power over females more so than they can their men counterparts. I think that's an unfortunate kind of like byproduct in the space, but it's really no different than the world we live around us. Like, I think we have to be very honest with ourselves that, that when you mentioned that, like, hey, it's not that there's more people, it's that we're empowering more people to find their true selves and to put themselves out there. And we still have such a long way to go. And, for someone like yourself that's been in the space for so long, I have to ask from the standpoint of like, what keeps you going? Because, I see the, the celebration and the great things, but we also know that, like, what Deadfellaz was building, where, contracts went, where creator royalties went. I think that was one of the first times you and I were ever on a space. Like, I, so bullish on removing the starving from the starving artists. And like, we have to change a lot of this narrative. And unfortunately, the flippers became more of a voice and got some things changed, in my opinion, that didn't do any of us, a service. What keeps you going? What keeps you motivated? What keeps you, inspired about this space as we continue through these times?
So as loud and as disheartening as the FUD can be, not against what I'm building, but against me as a person, like, it can be kind of really hard to be visible in this space and to be vocal in this space as someone that's saying something at, against quite the status quo, I guess you would say. It's challenging the ideas of the majority, and that can make people mad. So I deal with a lot of threats online from, every platform. I've even experienced it, like in New York this last time, I experienced it in real life for the first time, which was,
What?
yeah, which was really confronting. But so then, I left where I was and I went to the 9DCC event, where I knew lots of amazing people would be, and the night ended really well, and lots of wonderful people. So I think that that kind of speaks to the way that the space is, where on one hand, there's going to be people that don't agree, and that's so fine, but you got to treat people like a human being. On the other hand, there's a lot of people that love what we're doing, and that's also fine. What keeps me going is I represent something that isn't the majority in this space. And when we're working in this industry, we're working at an intersection of technology and finance and art, and all of those industries are dominated by men for all of time. And when we talk about decentralization, I want that to apply to opportunity as well. And that will not happen if people like me stop.
Right.
So, and I feel like I have a duty to myself and to people like me and to people that I represent that haven't been able to push through and get to where I am through no fault of their own. There's many brilliant people, and there are a lot of hurdles in place, and it's only fair to acknowledge that. I have 3 children, and I want the world to be better for them. And I want the effort that we put into this to mean something, and to solve real problems and to make positive change. So that's what keeps me going, because I know the impact is great. So I push through. It's just hard sometimes, I'm not gonna lie.
It is hard, right? And I think we also have to own that is hard. I'm a dad of 3 girls, so I relate to having the 3 kids.
You
The
girls as well.
Oh, there we go. See, look at that. It's, I mean, I have 13, 11, 9. So mine are like, still on the cusp of love and daddy, but we're on that like, I'm dealing with teenage hormones for the first
Wow,
time, which is a
mine are
whole
much
nother.
younger. I have 3, 3, 6, and 8. So a lot.
Wow. Yeah. So hey, look at that. 3 girls. I would say like that is, something like I bought a ledger for each of them. They each have a couple, NFTs in their ledger. And a lot of it was, representation. Actually, the X Punks, the expansion punks was one of the first projects that I ever, asked them to pick their favorite out. And it actually was the first collection I had saw that put a non-binary representation into their collection as, one of the traits. And I remember being like, okay, hey, the way they're approaching this and the way they're looking at CryptoPunks and a lot of that identity to me meant a lot. And it, kind of put into, that connection. There's a couple other things I wanted to tap in. One of them being, female-led projects, female-led PFPs. There was definitely, that November, December, January timeframe of 21 to 22, where there was so many of them that exploded. There was many that were earlier. I actually, minted Fame Ladies originally, and we're part of like, remember a lot of that going down. But I also feel like that idea of like, it's often a problem in the speaking space, right? Where if the only panels that are having women are women talking about women in the workplace, it doesn't help anyone, right? Like it's such a cluster because how do we change the narrative? We empower equality across the board, and it's not about just those siloed topics. But I will say, with a lot of like you've been kind of a staple and someone that has been, in my opinion, a collaborator, a very loud voice that isn't afraid to kind of push back on what might be I would refer to it as like the crypto bro influencer crowd that exists today. But then there's also this idea of like, some of the brand partnerships, some of the events. What has been something that you've kind of, that has stood out to you that has kind of opened some of those doors? Because from the outside, some people say, oh, it must be nice you launched in 21. Must be nice that you have connections with people that are doing things. But for those of us that see what you've done, and for those of us that believe in the space, it's not an overnight success. If you have a must be nice mindset, you're part of the problem, in my opinion, in this space as a whole. But what would be some of the things that you could attribute to some of the things that have unlocked? Like, I love the Ledger partnership, and I love, like, there just seems to be a lot of beautiful partnerships that you've unlocked that I think so many just would love to tap into. And I think, I tip my hat to you for all of those, all that hard work that you've put in to make those things happen.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the must be nice mindset is kind of funny because I mean, I know personally a lot of the founders in this space, obviously, well, most of them really, we all talk. And a lot of people that are in the top tier of things that are in this industry have come from somewhere, or are well connected in some way, or well funded in some way. And I am not. And I think that like when it's like the must be nice thing, that it is frustrating to see, because it's like, I didn't know a single fucking person in
Right.
this space. It literally took networking and grit and determination and resilience and all of that to be here and to do this. You know, and I think that when we talk about overnight success, like it's easy to look at something as an overnight success, but at the end of the day, we minted out in a time where it was very busy, but we're still here and we're working with the world's biggest brands. Um, that is a great success, in my opinion, and isn't an overnight success. It's like a I mean, life is crazy. It's wild when I think about it. But yeah, the partnerships, it just comes from this is going to sound cheesy, but I'm just going to say it. You've got to be authentic. You've got to be building something that you're truly, truly passionate about that has a purpose and a mission and an identity. And I think that because we are so strong in that, it's easily conveyed when I talk to someone about it. Or we're throwing ideas around, or I invite someone into a space where we're showing up, it's really easy for that person to understand quite instantly what we're about and how we're received and what it means to be in Deadfellaz or a part of Deadfellaz. And so that's really made it quite easy to work with brands and collaborate like that. So DraftKings with the Rainmakers collaboration, yep. We were so blessed to be able to work with the NFLPA directly on that collection, and it was so fun to do. Their team is so nice. But that came through Matt Kalish being a fan of Deadfellaz originally and connecting with their team. The Wrangler team came to our event, loved it. They were in the horde as well. Ledger, I actually I approached. So I will say this actually: if you want to do a collaboration with someone, just be relentless and just approach them and just message them and keep messaging them and find other ways and find other people and just keep going for it. I messaged Ledger basically when we launched with all these ideas because I saw the value in our community being closely linked to wallet security and being very aware of that. I really wanted it to be in the peripheral of the community that we had and people that interacted with us. So it was important for me immediately to try and work with Ledger. They were immediately receptive, obviously, and we have a great relationship. I love their team. I have great respect for them, especially Ariel and Ian and Eugene. Yeah,
Ariel's been a guest of the show and a good friend as well. I'm a big fan of hers as well.
She's one of the most brilliant women I've ever met. So there you go.
Yep. I love that. And I love that, like the persistency component of this as well. And, I'm also curious just from a standpoint of, a lot of contracts and a lot of projects are having, it's not, I think saying the word adapt is like it's under qualifying what people are having to do. We saw even, Goblin Town. I'm a big fan and a big holder in Goblin Town, what they're doing, merging contracts. I like what AJT and like that team has kind of approached some things, but like, let's face it, a lot of what, like you mentioned, you're still around today, you're still building, you're still a voice in the space, but a lot of what we all kind of loved, I think, was ripped away in many cases, and we've kind of had to adapt. How are you looking at that for like the future of Deadfellaz in like some of the tough decisions? Because I will say, for anyone that isn't a founder or doesn't understand the founder dynamic, like right now you have that, like, in my opinion, such a tough, every decision has to be, how do we reward, support, and continue to like celebrate our existing holders? How do we create welcome, inclusivity to where we can welcome people in, but then also how do we not kind of like pigeonhole us or put ourselves somewhere that one contract change or one OpenSea change, kind of, hurts us. And like, just me saying that should make everybody's mind hurt and give every founder a little bit more grace, like as a whole, right? Like, I wish that was something. But how are you looking at all of these moving parts? Because it's chaos right now on what is the business model that works? How do we set contracts that make sense? How are you approaching all of this stuff that's kind of being thrown at us?
Hearing you say it, I'm like, oh my God, did I have too much coffee today? I'm like, woo! Yeah, there's a lot. Founder life is a lot. It is to be a CEO, but to be a CEO under the microscope of thousands of people in an industry where you literally don't know what's coming, because nobody knows what's coming, because we're building the train tracks as we're hurtling on the train. It's craziness.
Right.
It's crazy. It's not for the faint of heart. That's for sure. so, so funny to hear you lay it out like that. Yeah, wild. We do make hard decisions. We've got to. It sucks in some ways because you have a vision and you have a plan, and then all of a sudden, like OpenSea comes along and they're like, "We're gonna do this or we're gonna do that," and it's like, guys, the royalties thing. For people listening that don't know, with the royalties thing, they took the royalties to 0 recently, and it's all trash. It's no good.
Oh,
That stuff. I mean, yeah, it hurts. It hurts us emotionally, but we have other revenue streams. We're lucky enough to have spent the last 2 years brand building, but it does absolutely nothing for the longevity of the space because the doors are closed now for emerging creators to come through and to make something at the speed that the communities are expecting them to create to. It's almost impossible now. You know, the way that people were raising millions of dollars, it was on valuations based off of the royalty revenue.
right.
That's so I mean, it's the foundation of the whole space. I don't understand why it's gone. I will keep fighting. There are alternatives coming, so that's what keeps me sane, because I'm very aware of multiple parties building amazing products. So I think that when you look at the landscape right now as it stands, just realize that it's not how it's going to be. And certain things that are being created are beyond the comprehension of some people. And it's really fun and exciting. So I'm bullish for the next year or so to see how that all evolves. Um, for us, yeah, I mean, you just have to stick to your vision. We've got a very strong vision, and luckily it doesn't rely on revenue from royalties, and it is allowing that balancing of the fence where you have to make sure you're embracing the community that's essentially put you where you are, because that's the reality, while expanding into new industries. Because I know for a fact that the Deadfellaz core audience is not in large numbers in the space as it stands right now. It's just not. We represent a demographic that literally is not in the space right now in huge numbers. And so that's really exciting for me, because if we're this successful now with the audience that we have, imagine in 5 years. Like that's a very exciting concept to me. I think we've cracked it with a product that we're rolling out over the next few months that allows that entry to the ecosystem at an accessible point while looking after people already in the system and whatnot. So I am excited about that. Yeah, it's fun.
Well,
It's fun.
on that note, there's always this like weird theme, and early adoption is where I've built my entire brand and business. So like I was one of the first Google Hangout shows, Google Plus shows that blew up on there. I did a lot of live streaming on Meerkat and Periscope and a lot of that like tech. So I know a lot of these waves, and one of the waves, of course, is the impatient new user. But then there's like this addiction to mass adoption or to the onboarding, and I've been pushing something. I'm curious your take on. I think we actually have to focus first on the reboarding, and I hate the term. I come up with something better, but we've lost so many great holders and great people from the space from for one thing or the other. Some of it had nothing to do with the space, right? It had to do with the economy or decisions outside of their home. But we've also lost people that like were like the perfect person to be a Deadfellaz holder, yet they decide to mint something that ended up being not even a rug pull, but something that exposed them to the underbelly of the flipping community, right? How do
Yeah.
you think we can kind of attack this idea of like reboarding people that kind of believed but had a bad experience? Because I think that's actually the bulk of like where we could really make a big impact. But I think people are struggling to wrap around their heads around like what would it take for us to kind of do that and bring people back in the fold?
I think that we've lost a lot of people through, I mean, it's been a brutal market cycle, right? And the reality is, a lot of people entered this space on a dream of making a lot of money.
Yep.
Whether you stuck around for the community or not is besides the point. That is the reality of why most people started in this space. And when that didn't eventuate, I think it was quite a daunting thing to accept, because it's that, oh, I've invested so much time and energy and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I can understand why that would hurt if that was the expectation that you had coming into the space. I think for those people, there is an underlying level of understanding of where this space is going. But in order to get them back, and in order to really, plead our case to everyone in the world, there needs to be real use cases that are solving real problems. So, and you just don't see that very often. Like, cool, there's a Web3 game, but what does it challenge in the real world that makes it even worth participating in?
Right.
How does that make your life better or easier, or how are you rewarded more? And it's the same when you see Web2 brands entering the space. Like, what part of that strategy loops into your overall strategy as a brand? All of that needs to be considered. You are seeing it from a few people, and for me, I think that's cool. It is just a matter of time, because that sort of stuff cannot be rushed. You can't just like quickly develop that over 2 months and then have it out. We've seen people release games in this space and it just flops because it's like the players aren't here. It doesn't really answer any problems. It sort of just is what it is. So
And oftentimes the blockchain's making it harder,
yeah,
which technology for technology's sake that adds more obstacles is a guaranteed loser. Yet I think that ends up being something people lean into.
that's it. Why would you want to spend your time participating in something that's full of friction, is expensive, like emotionally challenging? There's so much. There's so much. So until we start to see things actually solving problems and being easy and seamless and just feel good, uh, that it's almost like going back to when I needed to see people talking and participating in the space as I would to validate my participation myself. It's the same thing. That's why we're focusing on what we're focusing on now, empowering creators, especially with user generated content and whatnot, because that is what people need. It's a problem that needs solving in Web 2. So, yeah.
Novel concept, right? Like let's look at problems from Web 2 and say, how do we solve them using Web 3 solutions? Like I'll tell you, we do solo episodes on the show, and I dedicated April and May to use cases only. So every solo episode, I'm attacking different use cases. The one that came out last episode was on nonprofits. I'm like addicted to the nonprofit space on where they can leverage the blockchain NFTs.
Yeah.
I'm advising a couple companies right now that are already in that. We have an episode coming out that is really targeted towards like that digital coach online entrepreneur that we know needs a space. But I also, it's why I had the team from Forum 3 on a couple of them from Starbucks. I like what Starbucks is doing with Starbucks Odyssey. Is they have a great Web 2 solution. They realize there's a Web 3 solution that can actually bridge something that was a problem they had. And I think it's exciting to see that is the piece. And I'm 1,000% with you. Until we have the use cases, until we are clear on problems that we solve that don't add more friction or more tech for tech's sake, we're going to continue to be the same, kind of bumbling along, kind of as we go. You mentioned UGC, like the user generated content side. How are you looking at that? I think we have a lot of conversations on AI. I've been selling a lot of my own AI art now. It's actually what's above my head at the moment. There's so much conversation on like property rights, and I was on a space yesterday about IP, but then we also have this like UGC like identity piece, right, where people are part of a community when they feel like they're contributing as much as they're getting out of it. How are you looking at that? And I think we'll wrap with it after that, but I'm curious, just you threw that in there, and I think it's such an important problem that still needs to be solved, and it's exciting that you're kind of looking at that, especially in this space where we're at now.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think that digital identities are being used to create content, to express ourselves in ways that are maybe safer to do in the real world. We're sharing ideas, we're developing ideas, we're challenging ideas. There's so much value in it. Even just at the level of entertainment, like it's valuable. Um, it is the new marketing and advertising. We know this well. But there's an issue in that user generated content is often owned by the platforms or owned by brands. And the decentralization of ownership to you owning your own content and owning the tools that you use to create that content, how it's distributed, how it rewards other people participating in it, viewing it. It's this new economy that doesn't exist yet that needs to exist. Um, It will shift the dynamic for a lot of industries. E-commerce will change. It will be a really big thing. And so we're thinking ahead and making sure that we're facilitating creators in our ecosystem to take advantage of that. People, especially now when, because there's a lot of projects where you own the IP of the token that you hold. That's cool, but like, I don't know about you, I can't animate. I don't know how to animate.
Right.
So really, what content am I going to create with my IP? Like in terms of streaming or making a podcast or being in a band or all this stuff. There's a lot of stuff that it creates a barrier to entry again to only people that have that knowledge. And I'm all about bringing those barriers down. So we're working hard on getting tools and resources to creators to be able to do things with their IP, which is, it's going to be exciting to start seeing roll out. We've got the streaming fellas coming out really soon. We've been working hard refining that, which is going to be cool. So next time we're on this, I might be an animated
There you go. I like it.
profile picture. But yeah, I mean, it means a lot because it's the future of an industry that I think many brands in this space need to be acknowledging.
Yeah, the even the use of IP from like we can't use Bored and Hungry as like the only example of taking, and I know they're not the only ones, but every time I hear that brought up on like a Twitter space, I know the example they're going to use, right? And it's like, come on now, like that's, that's part of it is like, how do we, and I think even going, beyond that to being like, okay, well, how do we integrate this even into our digital websites and our experiences? Because I'm a big believer that our digital identity, looking at someone's wallet, will actually tell us a lot about somebody, the things they care about, the communities they're a part of. And we're going to get to that spot, right? And part of it is that's exciting. We just have a giant gap. And not to mention you have like, Seth Green, and he's doing an animated series and gets his Bored Ape stolen. And it's like, it's like, no, like, how is that not in a vault? How is that even connected to a wallet? That anyhow, that's a whole nother security conversation. But
I mean, all that stuff's definitely a niche, because at the end of the day, when you think about people that are going to participate in these brands, the people that even can hold the assets that unlock that sort of stuff is so limited. And when we talk about onboarding, everyone, I feel like, has this idea that, there's going to be millions of people that want to spend so much money on these JPEGs. And that's really just not the case. It's not the case. It will always be a niche. The niche will be large and larger than it is now, granted. But realistically, the majority of people participating in this space won't even know that they are. It will be frictionless, and it will be as simple as engaging with a content creator that uses this IP, or, engaging with the IP in another way. But it will look different to how I think most people are looking at mass adoption. So I'm keen to kind of shift that perspective a little bit.
I could not agree more. I think the digital identity component will drive so much of the innovation, and that's going to drive so many things that people aren't even looking at right now, right? Where, the collectible space, the idea of like, of being a part of that's always existed. Like it's existed in Web 1, existed in Web 2, but I do look at this idea of first impression, your personal brand, even like what your future of a credit score is. I believe these archaic systems that we will break down with a blockchain and re-identify, right? It should be a trust score, not your credit score. And how do we do a trust score when we have a blockchain? I think it's pretty damn simple. In my view, we just have to get a lot of these things on chain. And to that fact, I completely agree with you on the sense that the niche will always be there, but there's also things that will bring people in that not sure that everyone's kind of looking at. But excited to see hear all the things that you're doing. So glad to have you on the podcast. Any words you want to leave the audience with? Anything that we missed, you want to make sure you highlight?
No, not really. Not really. We're Deadfellaz on Twitter. I'm Betty NFT on Twitter, and Betty DFZ on Instagram. I just joined Blue Sky. Have you tried Blue Sky yet?
I haven't. I've seen it all over my feed. I was like, I need to jump in and try it out and kick the tires there.
It's okay. It's like a janky Twitter right now, but it's pretty cool. I don't know. I'm giving it a shot. Why not? Hey.
Yeah, why not? I mean, hey, I'm all for that early adoption and side. And I'll tell anyone that's listening, I say this for certain episodes, and I don't say it very often, but this is an episode that I recommend you bookmark it, take the link, put it on your notes, app. And when people are looking at, what what does this space represent? What are we trying to do? And who are the good people that have been here since the start, that are standing up for good things and are building good things? This is the episode you share with your friends, you share with that business partner that doesn't understand what the hell you're doing with these JPEGs. And Betty, it was a true pleasure to have you on the show. We'll definitely put all the links in the show notes, and excited. Maybe we'll catch up over there in Consensus, as well. So we can
Yeah.
hang out IRL.
Yeah, that'd be great. You're very kind. Thank you for all the kind words. And this has been fun. I've enjoyed this.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. For all those that are listening, as always, do me a favor, show you care. Right now is a great time and a great opportunity. Just reach out to a friend, reach out to someone that has created content, a tweet, Instagram video that has touched you, that inspired you, maybe, motivated you to do something, and just let them know that you care. Caring is it's a pretty damn low bar right now, because people aren't doing it enough. But I can promise you, the more that we show each other that we care, the more that we appreciate those that are doing good things, the more it will help them continue on. And nobody would say that you care too much. And in this world, let's make it a more world of more caring. So until next episode, my friends, make it a great day. Cheers, everybody.